Looks like we are opening up on that ley line for Cody Lewis, and we are actually starting this match from the beginning. Sacred Foundry shocked in turn 1, Ragavan.
And this is the opening that you want to have if you're in Lewis's seat.
Yeah, that ley line, that's part of our 1-2 punch. That's our combination that makes our Scion of Draco castable and really tough to beat. Here's a turn 1 Tamiyo for Tubergen.
And, you know, we've had a lot of talk about Tarkir Dragonstorm impacting Modern, Corey Steelcutter. That's something that everyone knows about at this point, or a lot of people have heard about it. There are 3 other cards from Tarkir Dragonstorm in Tubergen's deck. That's Narset, Jeskai, Waymaster. Such an incredible card advantage engine whenever you're willing to commit all of these 0-mana cards into your deck.
Yes, really nice draw engine. I think that card would line up quite well against Corey Burkhart's Grixis deck, for example. Big test against Cody Lewis's Domain Zoo is, do we have that Scions to make these value plans tougher to execute? Definitely looking for a fast clock for Lewis. We'll see what turn 2 can yield. Once again, we see Ragavan being checked by Tamiyo.
And this is interesting because it shows how differently the cards play on the play versus the draw.
Yes, as Tribal Flames able to cleanly answer Tamiyo and allow this Ragavan to connect. Ooh, Mistress Bobble by Ragavan.
Do you mind if Lewis just? Do you mind? 'Cause I don't think Lewis minds.
I would. I'll cast that for free. Thank you. Get a treasure for his trouble as well.
Oh, is Lewis thinking about it? Maybe just say, no, I don't want you to have access to this.
There's something to that being a card in graveyard. I think in this post-Underworld Breach era, it's not that real.
Right, we see a bunch of 3s hanging out in Lewis's hand, which has me inclined to believe that we're going to see a look for a 3rd land.
Some respect to Emery would be from not casting it, but Lewis does cast it and quickly gets the Bobble trigger. Playing with your opponent's Mistress Bobble can make that particularly tricky card even particularly trickier.
I think this speaks to just how intricate games of Modern can be, right? 3 total turns have been shared by these players. And already we're at the phase where players are kind of trying to think about, okay, well, what if they have this? What if I have this? What am I playing around? What can I beat? What trap do I not want to step into?
Yes. Every decision starting on turn 1 can, does, and will matter in this format.
Notably, Leyline Binding. A nice pickup for Lewis here, where if we see Tubergen do something like dump his hand and do a bunch to try and make Narset work, that is a really good way for Lewis to be able to clothesline Tubergen.
Yes. If you're maybe wondering about that tapped Scalding Tarn, that's because Leyline of the Guild Pact allows all of Lewis's lands to tap for any color of mana. I remember Urborg being something that caused such confusion often for viewers once upon a time.
That's Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth?
Correct, not just Urborg, which is a different card.
Yeah, we don't do that here.
Here's a backup Tamiyo and a tapped Hollowed Fountain, but that's it for Tubergen as we go back to Cody Lewis.
And now Lewis in the interesting position where I know we saw Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Flage hanging out. It's hard to not want to send Flage after Tamiyo, send her back to the Underworld.
This is really good, though, too. Scion of Draco has arrived.
Little crack of a treasure.
And there's Leyline Binding. Get that Tamiyo out of the way. Once again, Ragavan getting busy.
And this is so much of what goes on in these sorts of matchups, where whenever you see an aggressor trying to just say, okay, I have 1 or 2 pieces of disruption, I want to get pressure on the table and then sort of hold your head under and keep the game just out of reach of you assembling one of your synergies while I make your life a couple points lower, until the opponent inevitably runs out of life.
And the Ragavan, of course, has Vigilance because the Scion of Draco is going to grant that ability along with 4 others because the Leyline of the Guild Pact also makes these creatures all 5 colors. Corey Steelcutter exiled. That one is going to be permanently exiled, but a treasure does show up for Lewis.
So we're getting already down to 14. which doesn't sound that bad, except there's 6 on the table at this point. This Domain Zoo deck that Lewis has brought this weekend is so good at just having a bunch of burst damage between Flage, Lightning Bolt, Tribal Flames.
Also quite significant that Lewis had no third land. That means all gas in the hand. I do want to call attention to something. You see those dice off to the side. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties this weekend, so those life totals on the top and the bottom of your overlay, they're not going to be updating. Those dice are going to be moving. So Lewis is showing 20 points, and Tubergen is showing 13. The life gain off of the Regavan, I believe, was missed.
Mm-hmm.
Here is Mox Amber. Here is Emery.
Okay.
Mill for 4. Looks like Jeskai Ascendancy, Mishra's Bobble, and a couple lands. The Mox now online.
Yeah, being able to actually just accelerate out is one of the things that Tubergen has got to have front of mind at this point. Though, awkwardly, his interaction not going to be doing that much whenever Scion of Draco is giving everything some sort of protection.
Lewis going to give a read to Jeskai Ascendancy. 2 copies in Tubergen's deck this weekend. That's kind of a combo with Emery, but you can't play it out of the graveyard in any way in this deck. So milling it, a bit unfortunate. Tubergen also light on resources, just 2 cards in hand as we go back to Lewis. And here is Flage taking care of Emery.
Oh, and is that with lifelink? Ooh.
Oh my, it is. Gains 6 up to 26. Here come the Scion and the Regavan. How about gain 6 more? 32 life. This is kind of funny. Hits Mox Opal and has a treasure token and the Scion. So Metalcraft is online. Doesn't cast it. Doesn't need it.
I love not casting it. No, you know Tubergen's on repeal.
Oh, yeah. Could just pick it up.
That's so heads up from Lewis.
Smart. Good call. Go back to Tubergen. Here's Expressive Iteration. Needs to find a lot of help for not a lot of mana.
Gotta express something here. At this point, Tubergen's all the way down to 7. There's 6 on the table, and you know Lewis has, in their 60-card deck, I would estimate about 70 burn spells. So Tubergen's really feeling the heat.
Going to give a think to these 3 cards here. One of them destined for the hand, one for exile, and one to the bottom of the deck. We see repeal, like you said. Not as strong when there's no Mox Opal to steal back. Going to target the treasure token. Lewis can just sack it in response to fizzle the repeal.
Wait. Okay, looks like it just resolved.
Things you can do aren't always things you do.
Sure. And I like targeting the treasure there. I think there's a lot of temptation to target your own Mox Amber, where there what Tubergen is valuing is trying to actually just throttle Lewis on any resource at all. Just saying, hey, even if you sack this and I don't get the card, it means that Lewis can't cast something like another Flage next turn.
Exactly. It represents the 3rd mana, and currently 6 points against 7 life. Lewis would need another points to cross the finish line this turn, as you do see that attack for 6. But Regavan does make the treasure. And here is Lightning Bolt. That one's easy enough as Cody Lewis picks up game number 1.
And once again, we're just seeing a player choose Lightning Bolt over Galvanic Discharge. I think there's a lot of argument about if you want to do Unholy Heat, Galvanic Discharge, Lightning Bolt, and different decks have different needs. And I think that is one of the best parts about Modern is they're all strong in their own ways.
Yes, yeah, we see Boros Energy with Galvanic Discharge, but like you said, Lightning Bolt here for Cody Lewis, man after my own heart. This player's reach for the sideboard. Peter Tubergen now down a game with this Jeskai Ascendancy deck. What does he have here to try to combat this Leyline Scion deck?
So some of the things that stick out to me that are interesting, I like Wear Tear in particular. I think that game would have been extremely different if Lewis had not had access to that Leyline of the Guild Pact right off the bat. So that being something that Tubergen can do for 1 or 2 mana, be a little bit disruptive, maybe get a bit more breathing room is attractive. I like Orm's Chant as a possible thing that Tubergen could look at, is going for that fog mode is actually worth a lot. Just buying an additional turn, as silly as that might sound. Flage is also a pretty reasonable consideration if Tubergen thinks things can get grindy. For the most part, I think Tubergen is just trying to stick to sort of plan A here most of the time, but I think there are a lot of ways that he could choose to try and construct his deck going into Game 3, and the velocity of the average repeal Mishra's Babo, etc. deck really allows Tubergen to have a bunch of flexibility in how he wants these games to play out post-board.
Yeah, that tracks to me. So how are you feeling about these Flages on Tubergen's side of the matchup? There's been a little bit of iteration. Actually, the card Flage, pretty big deal for the Domain Zoo deck because we stopped seeing cards like Nishoba Brawler that would be easy pickings for the Flage. Is there merit just at trying to get this 6/6 online?
I can totally see a world where the first copy is something that Tubergen wants a reasonable amount, especially whenever you have cards like Emery that can kind of let you quote-unquote free roll the first half of it where it ends up in your graveyard and it just is a 6/6 a lot of the time for 4 mana. Having a little bit of a life buffer is a big thing that sticks out to me that I think Tubergen could end up wanting against a deck that leans so hard on burn, like we see out of Lewis here. But I think the second one is maybe fraught, especially when there aren't that many really good targets from Lewis. I know we see these Pyroclasms from Tubergen that I don't really know if we're going to see more than one of those come in when it can really only go after Fable tokens and Ragavan.
Right, not a lot of targets there. And then for Cody Lewis, the graphic, I apologize, has not updated again. We're working through some technical difficulty. We appreciate you sticking with us on that. Cody Lewis now up a game. What is he going to reach for on the Domain Zoo side of things?
So just looking at the sideboard, I think a lot of what we're going to see is Wear Tear on his side of the battlefield as well. Brotherhood's End is something that I think actually doing the sort of Shatterstorm version of the effect is pretty attractive. Orum's Chant is something that's really good at breaking up combos for the Silence mode. So it's funny where I think both players are bringing in a lot of similar cards, but they're using them in really different ways.
Yeah, pretty cool to see that in action, and pretty cool to see a live event like this. If you're having fun watching, maybe you should come out to one of our upcoming events here. We have SCG Con Orlando and Baltimore coming up. Those are going to be more Spotlight Series events. Those are open entry. If you have a deck, you can show up and play those ones. Or if you're looking for something a little bit more competitive, something you have to earn your spot to compete in, we also have regional championships coming up at SCG Con Houston and SCG Con Las Vegas.
And regional championships in particular are something that if you care a lot about the Pro Tour, those actually pay. Pro Tour invites are awarded down to the top 32. So quadruple the players at those events are going to punch their ticket to the Pro Tour. They have World Championship invites up top. Those are awesome. You can qualify through the RCQ system. There are a lot of different ways you can get into those. And the Spotlight Series, like the one we're at now, if you can't engage with the RCQ system, you can just come out and plant your flag.
Absolutely. Tons of cash prizes up for grabs this weekend as well. If you're interested in checking out these events, starcitygames.com/SCGCon. As we are underway in game number 2, Peter Tubergen now on the play. Scalding Tarn, Mishra's Bobble, and a Think.
And a pass. And this is so cool. The Mishra's Bobble fetchland thing is one of the things that just has defined Modern for the better part of a decade now.
Xander's Lounge for Lewis. As Tubergen is going to take a look with that Bobble. Think about whether he wants to use this fetch land, like you said. Does not like what he sees and is going to fetch. And relatively recent addition to the format. Now you can find a Surveil land and get another look to see if you like what you see.
And this one's nice, where I think there's a lot of temptation to call it 0 mana Preordain, right? But this is an enters tapped land, so it does kind of cost 1 mana. It just doesn't necessarily cost you a slot in your deck like Consider normally would.
Right. Meticulous Archive going to Surveil. The Portable Hole going to the graveyard. Makes sense with no plays on 1. Mishra's Bobble drawn, plus draw for turn for Tubergen. So far, so good on Mishra's Bobble triggers in this matchup.
Notably, Lewis does not have the Leyline, does have a Tri-land on 1.
Here's a Windswept Heath. Fun to see that one next to Xander's Lounge. Temple Garden, fetched by it. Perfect.
No, this is nice. I've always really respected a lot of Zoo players having a great idea of what their turns are going to look like in the average game, where you frequently see one or two Tri-lands, and then I would say 3 or 4 shock lands that round out the combinations of, okay, if I play out my turns this way, what does it look like? If I have this draw, what does it look like? And this just shows a great awareness of kind of how you plan to map out the way that your deck can play in a bunch of different combinations.
And I'll remind you that the life totals in the graphic are not accurate. There was a fetch shock there for Lewis down to 17. That 1 pip on the white die there, if you're wondering what that is, I'm right there with you.
It's the game win.
Ah, all right, we're all caught up. Just some more lands and passing. Tubergen with a Flooded Strand, and now Lewis playing a Scalding Tarn as land number 3.
Tubergen got to be really happy to not see a threat from Lewis yet. I suspect Lewis has a more reactive Fable hand.
Tribal Flames upstairs.
Oh, talk to me.
2 words. Love it.
Face is the place. Holy, I know both of us really love a good old-fashioned Lava Spike. How do you feel about 5 of them?
I love Lava Axe. I love Lava Dart. I love Volcanic Hammer.
Whew, that is 5 damage. 5 fingers across the face. That is, whew.
Tubergen is going to fetch up another Surveil Land. It's Thundering Falls. Tubergen now at 13 is going to bin a Repeal. No targets for that one, so that makes sense.
Okay, so it looks like Lewis has a couple of Stubborn Denials, as well as a Territorial Kavu in hand. What this communicates to me is that Lewis really wants to have 2 pieces of interaction up and is paying a bunch of respect to how good Tubergen's deck is at quote-unquote just killing you.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So to go to Tubergen, and here is the front half of a Flage. That's going to also go upstairs. Lewis down to 13 after fetching. Tubergen up to 16. And notably for Tubergen, with all that surveilling, there are 5 other cards in the graveyard.
Right, this is the point of the game that I actually really like that. I want to zoom in for a second on that Tribal Flames from last turn, where it might have looked a bit premature, but Lewis has kind of identified, all right, Tribal Flames is eventually going to do this. So I just want to be mana efficient and make sure that I can cast my Kavu, hold up a Stubborn Denial and a Leyline Binding, or some combination thereof. And I think so many ways that Lewis has constructed their deck, been playing the games, just speaks to an awareness of what a long game with a deck that traditionally doesn't try to do that looks like.
Definitely like the navigation as we have Elegant Parlor fetched up. Lewis is going to keep one on top. Here is Flooded Strand as land number 4. And now it is Territorial Kavu time. That's the full 5/5. Something a little bit awkward, though. It's not in time necessarily to exile his Flage. We will see if Tubergen has red source number 2 / mana source number 4 for that, though.
In a lot of ways, something that Lewis could be doing here is actually just forcing Tubergen to spend his turn on it.
Yeah.
If it's just saying, okay, great, I am pretty happy if all of your turn is exile my whole graveyard, Flage.
And it's a long road there as we see Mox Opal, Mox Amber, Mishra's Bauble to get Metalcraft. Here comes Flage. There goes the graveyard. But kind of what you were getting at, this Flage does not answer the Kavu. It's just 3 points upstairs. Lewis to 10, Tubergen to 19.
A lot of ground for Lewis to make up.
Going to start by fetching the 9.
One of the nice things about this Domain Zoo deck is it generally does not nickel and dime its opponent very much. I know we saw it from Ragavan in Game 1 a little bit. Ragavan's just a really nice card, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the time when Domain Zoo is dealing, it's dealing 5.
Yes. Here's Rafine's Tower. This is pretty significant because it means Lewis will be going back to his turn now with 2 blue mana. You talk about Stubborn Denial hanging out in the hand. I believe that there is also an answer to the Flage waiting in the wings. Lewis could really start going to work here as here is Leyline Binding to start that.
Notably, a ton of respect being paid, specifically to any reactive spells, where we saw Lewis fetch a tap land, wait to untap until getting into this sort of reactive fight, where Dispatch goes after the Kavu, Stubborn Denial answers it, Kavu comes in for damage. Lewis still has mana up the whole time.
Kavu now going to Rummage, going to discard an Arid Mesa to draw a card. Yeah, the Dispatch, not the most exciting target in a graveyard, so that makes sense. Tubergen down to 14 as we go back his way.
Wow, I cannot say enough nice things about how Lewis has played this game. Just first couple turns were almost confusing, right? But it just really shows a lot of awareness for how to really convert the cards you are given into a win.
Yes, really nice navigation. Here's Wear Tear, though. Going to go after that Leyline Binding, but like you said, that navigation, Lewis at the ready with another Stubborn Denial. Waited to get the double blue mana. Love it.
This is awesome. It is so hard to not just be stoked when you're watching someone at the top of their game play incredibly.
Yes. Tubergen now decides to cash in that Mishra's Bauble. Maintained it previously because of Metalcraft. Looks at his own top card. Here's Flooded Strand.
Tubergen still at 14. Has a little bit of life to play with.
Emphasis on a little bit.
You know, of life to play with.
That Kavu is not messing around in the clocking you department. So Tubergen is going to keep that card on top and draws it on Lewis's turn. Kavu is going to rumble across, and this time it goes after the Mishra's Bauble in the graveyard.
Is that 3 cards in hand for Lewis? Whenever your opponent attacks with something that can rummage and they go, I guess just exile one of your cards in the graveyard, you cannot be feeling good.
You know, these ones are not weak. Tubergen is going to fetch to 8.
So we know, eyes in the sky situation, Lewis has a bolt in hand. So that plus Kavu is a bingo.
That is correct. That checks out.
Tubergen really needs to assemble something here.
And there are only 2 Surveil lands in the deck, as the fetch is going to be a tapped Sacred Foundry. See what Tubergen's able to do. This deck can do some explosive things, but it really wants to do them on turn 1 or 2.
Right. This is the spot where a lot of Tubergen's real estate asks you to have other cards. Right, Narset, for example, Jeskai Waymaster is a card that if you cast a bunch of spells, it can draw you a bunch, but you also kind of need to untap again after that. It's really tough.
Scalding Tarn as the land. Here comes Flage. Flage targets Territorial Kavu. Could be something doing here for Tubergen. Life gain also relevant, going up to 11. And then Galvanic Blast to try to finish it off, but here is Stubborn Denial number 3.
Ooh, oh, okay. Okay, and it looks like now Kavu can go after the Flage, but is that bolt number 2?
I think you might be right. Kavu attacks. It does exile the Flage because this hand is made. Tubergen down to 6. Here's Lightning Bolt, and there's Lightning Bolt number 2. Cody Lewis. Going to go 2-0 over Peter Tubergen, and I like this call. First